What is going on, everybody? What is going on? The Catch fam. Hope you guys are doing phenomenal tonight. Man, it's going to be a fun stream tonight. We are doing our annual Fantasy Football Awards. So, running into the 2022 Fantasy Football Awards. Going to be a fun stream. We had a lot of fun doing this last year. We got a lot to get into tonight. We got Steven in the house. What's up, bro?
What's popping, man? Yeah, honestly, as much as I love fantasy football, it is fun to also talk about kind of the playoff season coming in here and just kind of breaking down the NFL, which we'll do tonight as well. But also just to kind of recap the full fantasy season and go over some of the guys that either totally burnt us or like really helped us get as far as we did in the season.
Thank you, Steven, because I totally forgot we were also doing playoff predictions at the end of this series.
Dude, I'm actually looking forward to that too, because I think we have similar thoughts, but I feel like we'll have some differences along the way as well, like in the first couple weeks of the playoffs.
I'm kind of torn with the playoffs. I'm not gonna lie.
It's a really good playoffs this year, I feel like. Outside of like maybe one or two boring teams.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. We'll save the juice.
Excited.
But of course, guys, this is gonna be a fun stream tonight. We're unfortunately not gonna be like super, like we're not gonna be able to get to every single chat, but we want you guys to be interactive. Give us your thoughts throughout tonight's stream during each category. Kind of on a time crunch, so we're trying to keep on a schedule, and we had some technical difficulties, so we're like 10 minutes late. But
no more Melon app in the bottom left, guys. No more Melon app.
Fixed all the Melon issues. It's a big day for us. So hit the like on the way in, guys. Hit the subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Hop in the live chat. Let us know what's popping, everybody. Appreciate you guys coming out tonight. And we're going to go through our 2022 Fantasy Football Awards. I'm super stoked for this stream. It's going to be fun. And I'm interested to get your guys' thoughts on everything and Steven's thoughts. So this is how we're doing it. Steven has no idea what's on each slide tonight. He just knows the categories. Does not know who I put on each slide. He's going to have a chance to combat whatever I put. And if he agrees, he probably won't be too competitive. But nonetheless, we're going to have some fantasy football discussion from the past year. And we're going to talk about the divisional round playoffs at the end of the stream. So let's do it. All right. First up, we got best quarterback. This was tough for me, man.
Yeah, it was real tight between Josh Allen and him. I went back and forth on it before this. When I said I was going back to kind of write some stuff out on a pad, I was like, you know what, this is really between Mahomes and him. But I think with Mahomes, first off, he's probably going to win the league MVP. At least he should in my mind. But also, he was just the model of consistency. He was a guy that you could lean on every single week. And in a couple different leagues that I was in or got insight into other people's leagues, I felt like the winner or the guy who's in the championship had Mahomes. He was a part of the championship week. So, dude, you just can't go away from him, man. But yeah, Josh Allen right up there too, for sure.
It was really, and so I think actually for me, there were three quarterbacks.
Really?
I think Hurts was in the discussion too, but Hurts had the injury, right? I think Hurts easily could have ended up being the best fantasy quarterback on the year if he did not miss week 16 and 17.
Yeah.
You look at the pace at the end of the season between, weeks 8 and week 15, he had 22 or more fantasy points with a ceiling of 36 fantasy points. So I think he was actually pretty close. And, I say this with all due respect and thoughts and prayers still out to DeMar Hamlin, but I think really what this came down to with Josh Allen potentially not being number one is he did not play in week 17, essentially. But when you look at, Josh Allen versus Mahomes through week 17, it was like neck and neck, man. It was very, very close. And even the numbers for Allen versus Mahomes between weeks 15 and 16 are very close. They both had phenomenal years. Hurts had a phenomenal year, but I think you hit it right on the dot, Steven, throughout the season. The consistency that Patrick Mahomes brought you this year was incredible. And a little bit of a value pick when it comes to the quarterback position, because in a lot of drafts, he slid a little bit further back, depending on who you drafted with. Obviously, Allen went number one in most leagues, but he had leagues where Herbert went number two. You had leagues where it was mainly Herbert, if anyone, but mainly Mahomes still went number 2. But you still saw in a lot of drafts Mahomes fall back a little bit. So
And it wasn't even, John, like to the point you're getting at, it wasn't even like number 2. It was like we were seeing him slide round wise. We were seeing him slide pick wise. Like people were like, you know what? It's Josh Allen and nobody really else. We're going to let the other quarterback slide back. People were thinking Mahomes wasn't going to be good because Hill's gone. And then Mahomes comes out here and he's kind of, I feel like, very close to a consensus QB1 and the MVP of this season. So very cool.
it was close. And I think a lot of these were the best, quote unquote, best.
There's a couple that are, I think, kind of clear. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's,
I think
there's
we're gonna
one
agree.
that is for sure clear. Yeah.
I think we'll agree on most of these. I thought this one, we definitely want to give Josh Allen, in my opinion, Jalen Hurts a shout out here. But I think he hit it right on the head. Patrick Mahomes just so consistent.
And Matt
year.
Ryan. Matt Ryan was like probably QB3 for me. It was tough though because Nick Foles also looked really good. So it's tough.
Good way to get off of this one. Prey, Richard Glass, Andrea, Thomas, Jane, Smokey, Aaron, Eric, everyone in the chat, Senior Cinnabon. Appreciate you guys being here tonight, man. Like I said, won't be able to get to every chat tonight as we're going through the slides, but let us know as we go through each slide who you guys think should have won their respective award. Cinnabon, I don't necessarily disagree. You might be our 2022 Fantasy Football Mod of the Year for everything you did for the Discord channel, for sure. All right, moving on. Let's go to best running back of the year. It's got to be Eckler.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I think I kind of hinted to this on last week's stream where I started kind of hating on Christian McCaffrey and talking about how if I were, in reverse role now, I'm really, you were smart to go Eckler in our personal draft. And he was just so great. I mean, in the beginning of the season, even when he was getting kind of hated on, I felt like, the first quarter of the season, he was a PPR machine, catching passes left and right. That obviously carried through the whole year. I mean, with everybody going down on the Chargers, Eckler was right there, thick and thin. And another thing with Eckler, too, was I was concerned coming into this year about injuries because in the beginning of this guy's career, he battled injuries. But this is another year, 2 years in a row. He has been pretty healthy. You have seen this guy. He is built. He's chiseled, man. And it came out, man. He's definitely RB1 in my mind. This is 2 years in a row where he's just been a freaking machine.
RB2 last year at the end of the season, RB1 this year at the end of the season. Like you said, got it done either way. 915 rushing yards, 13 rushing touchdowns, 107 receptions, 722 receiving yards, 5 receiving touchdowns, 372.7 fantasy points in full PPR, including week 18. But just overall a monster season. Between weeks 4 and 9, that was like his most wild stretch. 24 or more fantasy points in all of those games, and ceiling at 35 points. But you know why, in my opinion, Austin Eckler really was the RB1 on the season is because between weeks 15 and 17 in the fantasy playoffs,
monster.
Yeah, 32 points in the championship, 23 in the semifinal, 15 in the first round. And not every top tier running back necessarily did that. But I will mention, Steven, your boy Christian McCaffrey, a very good playoff run as well.
He
25, 13, 31 in the playoffs.
Yeah. Week 18, he still did stuff along with Elijah Mitchell too. It's pretty cool, man. CMC still doing it.
Don't say the name Eli Mitchell to me because in my week 18 league, I was this close to picking up Eli Mitchell and Alexander Madison.
Oh,
and I didn't.
Brutal L.
So that was a bad L. Yeah.
That's a big L.
All right, let's go on to the best receiver of the year. Steven's repping him tonight. Yeah. I do want to mention, so I made these trophies, and when I typed in running back, oh crap.
That one was pretty easy too.
When I typed in quarterback, we got this cool little QB. When I typed in running back, we got this guy. When I typed in wide receiver.
What the heck?
I thought I had to keep it there. It's like someone receiving a package. I thought
that's cool. Awesome. I love that. That.
But yeah, Justin Jefferson, not even close. Right?
It's so cool too because the coaching regime and the Rams they produce Cooper Kupp, right? For some reason I'm forgetting his name. Is it O'Connell? The guy who came, yeah. O'Connell comes over to the Vikings, and he's like, "Oh, we're doing the same thing with Justin Jefferson." And like we knew Justin Jefferson coming into the year was a beast, but that's a lot of smoke, right? You're not going to produce a Cooper Cup type of year. And then Justin Jefferson comes out and he does this, man. He absolutely lit it up. This guy was so crazy in a couple of games where he just put up like unreal numbers. It was so fun to watch. I mean, the week 1 game against Green Bay where he just lit them up, that was kind of like the coming out party. Like, this is my season. Every other receiver, Jamar Chase, they can step aside. And he had a stranglehold on this thing from the very beginning. And it kind of is wild because how Jair Alexander actually shut him down at the end of the year still baffles me. But man, he was awesome. He absolute beast.
9 games or more, or excuse me, 9 games on the season with 25 points or more.
That's absurd.
Monster.
Just
368 fantasy points in full PPR, your number 1 receiver, full PPR and standard scoring formats, 128 receptions, 1,800 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns. So your next closest receiver was Tyreek Hill. It's about 20 points behind overall. Hill had a really good year.
Oh my gosh, Hill was fantastic. I thought Hill was going to break the receiving yards record. I thought he was going to do all sorts of crazy things.
JJ was close too.
Yeah. And honestly, too, when you look at JJ's stats, I feel like there's room for improvement, right? You get those touchdowns up to 10 or plus, we're talking an even better year. So this is not the end for him. I think this is going to be a very fruitful career ahead of him with Kirk Cousins. This Vikings offense is going to be something fun to watch, especially if Adam Thielen takes a step back, maybe more volume goes his way. Justin Jefferson here for a while.
We got Albert in the chat, Emil. I don't know if I already shouted you out. We got Little Bunny Hop in the chat. What's up? We got Ghost Hunter. We got Blaine. Got the dub. Thanks to y'all. Let's go, Blaine. Let's get it. Appreciate you guys coming out. Let's move along to the best tight end of the year.
What is this? With tight end, like a rear end?
I typed in tight end and I got that. Man.
Wait, where are you getting these photos?
Canva
coming out here with some wild shenanigans. I'll tell you that. Shout out.
Not even close here. I mean, it's this is probably the slide we can spend the least amount of time on. I mean, 316 points in full PPR for Travis Kelce, which is just crazy. The tight end 2 was TJ Hawkinson. He had 215.4. That's a 100-point difference. Crazy.
I'll tell you what, while this might be like super obvious consensus pick of obviously it's Travis Kelce. I mean, I see Prey out here shouting out Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram was great, right? And then you look at Kelce and it's like, literally Kelce is making me think about changing my entire draft strategies going forward. Like, I'm like, if I drafted Kelce in the beginning of my draft, like my entire team is just a different group. Like I can build on it in so many different ways. Like I am viewing Travis Kelce as like kind of like a must draft player. Like I would take him in the top 3 picks. Like it's just, he's that important. And in the past, I've been very against that strategy. Even though I love Kelce, I was like, nah, second round, maybe back of the first, but second round, probably no more, man. I don't care how old he gets. Like Kelce and Mahomes, that chemistry is fantastic. And another thing, like I said, with Mahomes about, you see Mahomes in a lot of championship type of roster percentage. I feel like Kelce's up there too. Whenever I talk to people that are in the championships or made it really deep in the playoffs, they've got Kelce because he's such a competitive advantage.
Yeah, and it's like, it's funny because going into this season, I considered like in our personal league going Kelce.
You did. You were joking. I thought you were joking, and then I mean, it worked out. It worked out for you, anyways.
Well, to be debated how that league worked out for me, but it's just not even close, man. I mean, it's just there's nothing to really talk about here. I wanted to tell you something though. 2014, so 2013, right? Kelce's rookie year, he was hurt or whatever, right? 2014, he is your tight end 9. 2015, he's your tight end 9. 2016 to 2020, he's your tight end 1. 2021, tight end 2 behind Mark Andrews. 2022, tight end 1. He's been dominant beyond dominant in fantasy football at the position. Not even close.
And honestly, the year with Mark Andrews, that was a pretty competitive, good season at the
It
tight
was
end position
close.
because you had Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce performing at a very high level. And then you also had George Kittle, who was having like that crazy end of season surge to get himself up there too. So honestly, that was a really awesome year for the tight end position. This year was like, holy crap, everybody sucks, other than maybe Evan Ingram at the very end. But yeah, I mean, Travis Kelce, definitely going to have my eyes all over him next year.
We got J Dubs and Godfather in the house. What's up? What's up? Those of you asking about kicker defense, we will get there shortly. Don't worry. All right, moving right along. Best kicker of the season. I'm going Danny Carlson.
This was my guy last year. I loved Daniel Carlson. I loved him all throughout the season. Many times I would get the question throughout the year, or do I pivot off of Daniel Carlson? No, you don't pivot off of Daniel Carlson. This guy's an absolute beast, dude. He just always got it through the uprights. This is not my number one kicker, though. This is not my kicker. So this is actually where we disagree. Okay. And I'll tell you why. It's Brett Maher for the Dallas Cowboys, and it's for this reason. In the beginning part of the year, he had a very good stranglehold on the kicker position. He was like right in there in the top two, number one for a certain period of time without Dak Prescott. He was balling out, man, just lighting it up. We both loved him. I was always trying to get him on my team. Then he hit a down period, right? And that's where Dak Prescott came back. This offense changed. But at the very end of the season, man, he went off, dude. He was like lighting it up, double digits. I felt like Daniel Carlson had a couple weeks where I was a little disappointed with him towards the end. Regardless, Brett Maher killed it at the end of the year. I think he actually finished as the number one kicker stat-wise. So both of them, top two, right up in there. And I can't really go wrong with these guys. But time to crown a new king. Time to crown Brett Maher.
Yeah, it's hard because the numbers I'm looking at are now going, including week 18. But I think you make a really good point because if you go through week 18.
Week 18 sucked. I'm not counting week 18. Week 18 was really bad, but you talk about week 17. Yeah.
No, Brett Maher through the playoffs was arguably the best kicker in fantasy football, 12, 18, and 10. On the season, including week 18, Carlson was your number one. So
yeah.
But Brett Maher was the next kicker I thought about outside of Justin Tucker, but both of these guys played better from a fantasy perspective this year than Tucker. Mm-hmm. But Maher also brought some really high ceilings.
Huge ceilings. Yeah, huge ceilings. Yeah. Definitely like week-winning type of performances, which I love to see. And yeah, there is those times of, Justin Tucker, man, I tell you what, this was not Justin Tucker's year, in my opinion. I will tell you, though, probably, as someone who saw a lot of comments about the kicker position, the most popular kicker was Dicker the Kicker. Everybody loves this guy, and I feel like he's not even that ice, I feel like it's just the nickname that got him so much popularity. But I see another Jason Myers talks about it. I love Jason Myers all year. John, you and I talked about him. I would give a shout out to Nick Folk. Yeah, he was great. The weather brutally killed his value towards the end of the year. And the real fantasy MVP for the kicker position, John, it's the Vikings. Because they were just amazing to stream against, guys. If you ever saw any of my videos, there's a stream against them every single time you get.
Yeah, Robbie Gould being mentioned. The one kicker who I think needs to be mentioned, by the way, Steven, that you made a really good call on, was Matt Prater throughout the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah,
like you won people championships based on Matt Prater.
He pulled up.
That was pretty big this year.
He pulled up and shot a Steph Curry range 3. Man, he was killing it. It was like the one good spot of this Arizona Cardinals offense.
Do you like the trophy I made? I've worked really hard on that.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting looking guy right there. got a big head for sure.
All right, let's move right along to defense.
Yeah,
I went with the Patriots.
Dude, you look at that playoff stretch, that last 4 or 5 week stretch where they were scoring touchdowns every single game. And you know what's crazy, John, is when we were talking about, do we drop the Pats, right? we were like, yo, this is a scary schedule coming up. And we were like, honestly, this is a pretty rough schedule. I don't know how you feel about it. And these guys come out and they just put up even more touchdowns. I mean, they were
Yeah,
amazing, outstanding.
it is crazy. Your defense won on the season at
Yeah.
the end of the day, but the thing, because I was really close to going the Niners,
Oh yeah. But they kind
who
of fell off a couple weeks in a row.
yeah, they finished as your defense 3. They had double digits weeks 11 through 15, so I was
Yeah.
really, really close. But ultimately, when you look at the Patriots, Stephen hit the nail on the head. Playoffs: 13 points, 15 points, 12 points, and 21 points in week 14. If you were really in a position where you needed to get into the playoffs, and then
Yeah.
I mean 26 in week 9, 23 in week 5, like just overall the best defensive unit on the season from a fantasy perspective. There are a lot of other really good defenses: the Bills, Cowboys, Eagles. So there are some teams that were, really well utilized in terms of streaming. But at the end of the day, this was your most consistent defense in fantasy football. Just another year where this system, Bill Belichick, gets it done. So,
Chuck,
uh,
let me ask you a one-off question here. It might be hard to get on the spot. What was probably the most disappointing defense for you coming into this year?
easy.
Mine's
And
the
they go
Mine's
ahead.
the Browns, kind of, because
Okay.
the first quarter of the season we were highlighting that as a draft these guys at the end of your draft. They've got a very easy schedule, and they had some obviously really good secondary on paper. Miles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney. I thought this defense was going to be completely different. They come out and they're like very bottom of the league. I was really pissed off about that.
For me, it's the Saints because
They were right there too with me.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
16 points in week 8, 20 in the fantasy championship. If you play through week 18, 12. Other than that, no double digit performances. And I thought they'd be a much better unit as well. They were another team, mock draft season. And I was saying, just scoop up the Saints at the end
Yeah.
of your mock, and they just did not. They weren't necessarily like an awful defense, but they weren't a great fantasy defense.
Yeah.
Which there's definitely a
The disappointment was that we saw much more from them in the past, and then you got Dennis Allen, the defensive guy, taking over, and they take a step back with seemingly not a lot of talent lost. So it was a little surprising. It was also a weaker division. Tom Brady sucked. It was weird why they took that step back, but it was also, I thought, the biggest disappointment on defensive side throughout the year. I was a little disappointed. The Cowboys kind of fell off towards the end a couple
yeah, that's
times.
fair.
They had a couple games that I think probably hurt people pretty badly. But man, everybody who stuck with all the streaming week to week at the defense position, I think you see the value in streaming defense.
Yeah, and the Cowboys still finish as your number 2 overall.
Yeah, they definitely did.
12 in the championship.
Mhm.
And they were another team in mock draft season. I was like, man, look at the schedule.
Yeah.
Everyone was like expecting them to regress so heavily, and they just didn't really. So I still think they were really good. But I mean, they just had a lot of single digit performances towards the end. So.
What's crazy is that we looked at the schedule and we said they played the NFC East. One of my biggest proponents for these guys in the offseason was that they play the NFC East. This will be good. The NFC East is the best division in football, and they're still
division made it. Yeah.
And they're still number 2. That just shows how good these guys are. And you got Micah Parsons, who's an absolute freak.
All right, so those are your pretty straightforward slides. Now we're going to get into some of the fun stuff. And Steven's kind of on the spot here. So I'm interested to see how he rebuttals some of these. All right, let's move along. Most improved on the season. I went Devonta Smith here. So what I was looking at here was
like you owned him.
Well, I got to give myself a shout out because Devonta Smith was a player all off season, all mock draft season. I was like, get Devonta Smith, get Devonta Smith, get Devonta Smith, right? He was your wide receiver 29 last season. He finished as the wide receiver 9 in full PPR this season. He had an incredible stretch between weeks 13 and 17. He had 17 or more fantasy points in what are probably your most important games of the season. And outside of that, if we take away week 1 where he gave you a goose egg, he only had single digits in 4 games. Just a really, really good season. Really was, able to open up and as part of that offense with AJ Brown alongside of him. I kind of just want to give myself a shout out here because I love Devonta Smith coming in this season. But ultimately, I think jumping up 20 spots at the position in fantasy football is pretty big. The other player I really considered here was Amon-Ra St. Brown, but his jump wasn't as drastic. It was 14 spots up from wide receiver 21 last year to wide receiver 7, but he was really close.
He was on pace to be
Yeah,
like
he missed a little
fantasy
bit of time.
MVP. I mean, people were like, "This is Cooper Cup of this year, guys," and I mean, he kind of was, but obviously took a little bit of a step back with injury and everything. But honestly,
And
John, I was giving you grief, but Devontae Smith's a great pick.
yeah, I see people are already saying Josh Jacobs, which I knew was going to happen.
He falls into other awards.
Right, he does, and I think the main thing to look at with Josh Jacobs is he didn't like he played much better this year than ever in his career, but he went from RB11 to RB3, which is still a good jump. But overall, I was looking for a more drastic jump because Josh Jacobs was the other player I thought about here, and I do agree he will be on later slides. But Steven, I will let you state your player.
Yeah, so John, I feel like you might have him slotted in somewhere else. This is another guy that you had roster percentage of. Justin Fields was the guy I
That's a
played
great pick.
here. Yeah, I just think when you look back at this season and you look back at last year you saw a guy who it was so dysfunctional. You got Matt Nagy, you got the Bears hectic, coaching, and Justin Fields just looked like a lost puppy out there, right? And that kind of continued into the beginning of this season. And then if anybody was watching I think it was Thursday Night Football. It was the worst Thursday Night Football game with the Bears and the Commanders going up against each other. And that's where we saw the breakout, where Justin Fields had this really long run at the end of the game. He ended up with like 19 fantasy points-ish. After that, dude just took off, bro. 24, 26, 42, 40, 23. And we see a guy here who honestly I think has top-end speed of Lamar Jackson. This is a guy who you got basically at the very end of your draft. Justin Fields is somebody I'm super excited about in the future. If you get dynasty on this guy, he's going to be incredible. I can't get more excited about Justin Fields. I mean, he's just absolutely fantastic. And he went from nothing into absolute stardom. He's the heart of Chicago right now.
Yeah, I love that pick, and I just talked about a big jump for Devonta Smith. Fields jumped up 24 spots at the quarterback position from QB 31 last year to QB 7. Obviously, a phenomenal year for him, and he missed Week 12 as well. Struggled at the beginning of the year, and I will say Justin Fields shows up later on my slides as well. But I can't disagree. Like if we're talking about most improved quarterback on the season, yeah, it's not even close. I mean, I don't know. Trevor Lawrence, Geno Smith. There are other names out there, but Fields, I would agree, is ahead of those guys. So,
yeah.
But yeah, lots of good thoughts in the chat here. I mean, obviously Jacobs making a lot of waves. Kenneth Walker, I wouldn't say counts because he was a rookie. But Geno Smith, Trevor Lawrence, Tony Pollard is a good call. Jared Goff is a good call, excuse me. But I love the call on Fields there. I think it's a good one. So, but I had to, talk about myself and go Devonta Smith. All right, moving right along. Biggest boss.
Please. Thanks, man. You had to do it to me, huh?
And I went Jonathan Taylor here based off of draft capital, and and I do think it's okay when we talk about. There's two aspects I want to touch on. When you talk about a fantasy football bust, it's okay to consider someone a bust if they got hurt because you still spent draft capital on them and had an expectation that they didn't fulfill. But there are players who we just drafted high who just didn't play well this year. And then there are players who got hurt. And then there's a mixture of the two players who didn't play well and or got hurt. Overall, I think Jonathan Taylor, when he was healthy, played very, very well this season. But at the end of the day, Jonathan Taylor was your 1.1 or 1.2 unless you were in a keeper or dynasty league, depending on how you draft, right? But 90% of fantasy football drafts is your 1.1 or 1.2, maybe your 1.3. But overall, just based on draft capital, I think JT gets the biggest bust. But we still love you, Jonathan Taylor. And the other thing I want to put out there is just because a player is a fantasy football bust one season does not make him a bad football player or a bad fantasy football player in the future. I just want to put that out.
Yeah, and I know Prey was commenting, am I still a Colts fan? I am still a Colts fan. I'm actually pretty excited about the future. We definitely got some more stuff to build on this offense. And with that comment, I think that goes to Jonathan Taylor's future. I think there are some definite things that the Colts can do to put JT in a good place next year and he could really turn this thing around. I totally get though what you're saying with Jonathan Taylor being a big bust. I mean, he did kind of have a few weeks towards the middle of the end where he kind of did some stuff. I was actually very close to trading with Jerry for Devontae Adams straight up with Jonathan Taylor and decided not to. But how JT was put into that position with that terrible Colts offense, honestly, just a nightmare on wheels, man. And I like it. I like that pick. My pick, though, goes to probably one of the most annoying players to deal with. That is Kyle Pitts
Oh,
at the tight end position. I think this will be a somewhat popular pick. He rose up the charts at the tight end position. I know, I think in our personal league, Ben took him in the 4th round or something. But this is a guy who I think was just borderline useless. Weeks on end, he would just, be a guy that you had to play because his upside seemingly was so high. But Arthur Smith hates fantasy football. Arthur Smith hates logic, and he just never gave him the ball. And then it's funny because once Kyle Pitts gets injured, they start throwing it to the tight end position like crazy. And it just baffles me. It blows my mind. But yeah, Kyle Pitts was my guy just because it was just watching a dude who people put a lot of fantasy equity in just be totally useless and totally wasted. And it was sad to watch.
I think that's a really good pick. A really steep drop off was tight end 33 this past season, and last year was your tight end 6 in full PPR. And like you said, you had to play him when you owned him.
Yeah.
It was so funny on the fantasy Q&A streams because I was pretty hard pressed early on. Like, I do not trust Kyle Pitts at all. Sit him. I'm not trusting him this week. And like every week I would get really on my hard horse about it. He would score a touchdown. Week 6 and week 8, he scored a touchdown. But outside of that, week 3 against Seattle, who was awful against the position, he had 87 receiving yards off of 5 receptions. Outside of that, every single game, 7 or less points. And he only had 7 points in one game. Every game outside of that, 4.8 or less points. Obviously the injury, but like I said, injury can account here as well. I think, there is some optimism when it comes to Kyle Pitts in the future, but for now, I think it's a really good pick, Steven. I mean, it really is. Plenty of other guys we could mention here, but I like the Kyle Pitts call, and I like the Jonathan Taylor call as well. All right, moving right along. Rookie of the year.
Yeah.
I went Kenneth Walker here. I thought this was actually kind of tough. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough, but I think when you saw Kenneth Walker, the one thing about him was he added so much value to a position that at times was just so hard to get somebody on a week-to-week basis. And Kenneth Walker gave you just insane upside when he was fully healthy. He did get kind of banged up toward the end. He definitely did not finish the season fully healthy. But he stuck it out there. He trooped it out, and he played hard. And this guy runs super hard and is so explosive, man. His upside in the future, I mean, it's seriously untapped just due to the fact that already Seattle was investing in that offensive line, but they've got so much draft capital now, which I think they're going to continue to bolster up that offensive line. They've got so many skilled guys out there. Kenneth Walker, literally, when he started balling out in the middle of the year, I mean, he changed teams, he changed leagues. This guy was an absolute freak. He was on waiver wire some places. I got him off the waiver wire, I think.
Yeah, it was tough. I think, even though he only played, 8 games, I think Breece Hall could still be in consideration here. Yeah. Helped you get a lot of dubs at the beginning of the year. We're seeing a couple of the receivers, Olave and Garrett Wilson, being mentioned. I do think out of all the receivers this year, those two probably hold the most merit. Wilson was your receiver 21. Olave was 25, I believe. But like Godfather saying, lots of good rookies this season. I like Prey calling out Brock Purdy too. But I think just at the end of the day, the closest thing to a consistent fantasy football player who you could plug in and have a safe floor and lots of upside on a weekly basis once he was a starter, it was Kenneth Walker, right?
Yeah.
Little dinged up week 13, 3.6 points, missed week 14. Outside of that, once he was a starter, weeks 5 through week 18, he gave you 11 or more fantasy points. Just over 1,000 rushing yards on the year, 9 rushing touchdowns, 165 receiving yards. So I don't even think it's really close from a pure fantasy football perspective, I got to go Kenneth Walker here. I
Yeah,
like the
yeah, this definitely my pick too. But I see Prey shouting out George Pickens. I'm excited
Bears.
about George Pickens, and I think George Pickens could have been so much more than he was, but probably Kenny Pickett held him back a little bit. Having too many rookies probably hurt him a little bit, but definitely a lot of upside there. And there's so much upside with a lot of these guys. I think my favorite receiver was Garrett Wilson, which I
I
loved
agree.
Chris Olave the most coming out of the draft. Garrett Wilson changed the game. I mean, I would say the most love I had for the receiver was Jameson Williams, but we just never got to see what that guy could do,
Next
unfortunately.
year. Next year.
Yeah,
All right, that was an easy one. We're in agreement there. Biggest surprise. I went Fields at surprise.
that's a
And I
good one.
see Albert just mentioned we didn't mention Jamal Williams as biggest surprise. That's a pretty fair call too. But the reason I personally went Fields was because of my own conviction. I didn't have a lot of faith in I had faith in Fields' talent. I told you guys that during mock draft season. I didn't have a lot of faith in the Bears supporting Justin Fields. And they didn't really do so.
No, he just did
His
it.
natural ability took over. But
Yeah,
I just didn't have the faith that he would have the offensive linemen around him, the skill position players around him, and a defense that would keep him off the field, which he really didn't have any of that. But like I just didn't have the faith that it would get done this year. And his natural ability took over. And at the end of the day, he finished at what is your QB6?
five, I think. Right?
QB. Well, this is through week 18 that I've got here. I think it was QB6, all things, because he had 9.8 in week 16. He missed week 12. I think that brought him outside the top 5. But if he wasn't 6, he was 5 through week 17. So I went Fields here, and that's me kind of like calling myself out. Like I did not think that this was going to happen. And it was kind of torn in the offseason. You had a lot of people like well, A, just not mentioning him, or B, like this could be a breakout player due to his ability. But overall, there just wasn't enough of a consensus that Fields essentially went undrafted in most leagues. If he did get drafted, it's because there's just a drought at the quarterback position on someone's team. They took him, then they probably dropped him at the beginning of the year. And then it was just like, boom, like we talked about it earlier in the stream, out of nowhere, end of the Washington game, Fields comes on the scene and it just took off from there. So I'm going Fields here, but that has more to do with me than I think fantasy overall, if that makes sense.
No, I mean, like I already showered my love on Justin Fields, and I think you putting him in the fantasy surprise isn't really like that weird or anything. It's more of like there's so many different places you can put Justin Fields. Like you could argue he was fantasy MVP, right? Obviously, the playoffs wasn't really there, but he did some great things for every single team. I mean, in one personal league I had that was god awful, the only reason we started winning and got into the playoff mix was because of Justin Fields. So he was an MVP player type of guy. And
Sure.
now Prey shouted him out earlier, but Geno Smith was the guy I picked for mine.
Okay.
Geno Smith, what he did coming basically from being Drew Lock's backup in the preseason to being the number 6 or 7 quarterback on the year and actually being in the Pro Bowl and doing everything that we saw Geno do. I mean, truly amazing. It was fun. It was hilarious at times. I have so much passion and love for Geno Smith now that he's hilarious, dude. And he's just, dude, you just want to root for this guy. And he did some great things for fantasy. He turned into one of those guys you can stream on a weekly basis. He was a waiver wire pickup. And then he just kind of became a guy that you were like, I can't really bench Geno Smith at times either.
Right. I mean, between weeks 3 and 14, he had 19 or more fantasy points in every matchup except weeks 6 and 7. I mean, just a monster year. He beat Russell Wilson in week 1, had a really bad game in week 2. I will say Geno, and this doesn't have anything to do with this award, struggled in the playoffs for fantasy. But
why don't you screw off, man? Don't talk crap about Geno Smith.
I mean, I think overall he definitely fits the bill. We saw Jared Goff being mentioned in the chat. I think he's a really good call as well. But Geno definitely has to be up there. And like Godfather's saying, this is a good one. A lot of guys could fit here for sure. Yeah. There's a lot of good calls here. A lot of people still mentioning Jamal Williams is a really good call too. And Daniel Jones. I mean, yeah, those are all good calls.
Williams. I wanted to argue for a award of just most entertaining human being.
Yeah.
That was what I wanted to give him. There's no player that I just think is just better for human life than watching than Jamal Williams. The guy's awesome. Is anybody against Jamal Williams? Like, I just think he's everybody's favorite player.
Other than in Hard Knocks, whoever he was going, it was the Colts training camp. He got into with someone. But
Well, he's a
man,
hard
gosh,
player, man. He goes hard when he's
oh,
playing. I mean, even when he was going against his old team in Green Bay, you saw him when he hit a linebacker, man, he would come at you with full force, dude.
sure.
That guy, he is certainly fun off the field with the Naruto helmet and everything,
Yeah, I
craziness.
think we just have to go with most loved player on the year goes to Jamal Williams for sure. All right, biggest headache. Speaking of Jamal Williams, I went DeAndre Swift here because I think he fits the bill perfectly for biggest headache because you just couldn't pin down when do I sit DeAndre Swift? When do I start him? When is he fully healthy? When is he not fully healthy? When is Jamal Williams going to take away all of his fantasy value? When is Jamal Williams going to take away most of his fantasy value, but not enough to make him fantasy relevant? When you look at the stat lines through the year, 26, 16, 7, 0, 0, 0, 14, 8, 8.2, 12, 10, 21, 6, 12, 3, 27. Just no consistency there whatsoever. I love DeAndre Swift. I think when he's fully healthy, DeAndre Swift might be my favorite running back in the league. I was huge on Swift coming into the season. And Steven told me right before a personal draft, I know you love him. And I do agree he could be the best running back in the league from a fantasy perspective, but he won't be because he won't be healthy. And you were right. And
It's unfortunate, man. It's unfortunate because the guy is so talented, and it's honestly, it's just fitting that he plays for Detroit because he plays so much like Barry Sanders. I mean, with the moves he makes people look so silly. He's so good. He's so fast. He's so elusive. I want him to find a way to stay healthy. I want them to keep Jamal Williams though because I think Jamal Williams is good for him. And I'm excited for the future with this guy, DeAndre Swift. I just need him to do whatever it takes in the offseason.
Smokey going Herbert here. I like Herbert too. And
I will,
Steven, I
yeah.
want to hear your call for sure.
I got two. Okay, I'm gonna make the first one quick because the first one's just more of a personal vendetta, right? My first one is Gabe Davis. All right, I hated
That's
Gabe
good.
Davis
Yeah.
all year long. I have not talked more crap about a player in my life probably than Gabe Davis. Even when it was so clear that you should start him, I would say don't start him just because I hated him. But honestly, it was really frustrating to go with a guy like that. There's always been the boom bust players like a Mike Williams or something, but I felt like with Gabe Davis, it was even more frustrating for whatever reason. I was always on the opposite end of starting him. Guys like that are frustrating, and that was
Yeah.
certainly the case with Gabe Davis. He did have a little bit of consistency, but not really anything that you can point at and say like that was something that can get you by week to week. But he did have those big games. Obviously, the massive game against Pittsburgh was fantastic. But I think my award here for biggest headache, similar notion to Kyle Pitts. I think someone called it out in the chat too earlier. Mike Evans. Mike Evans was a guy, right? I traded for right after that big touchdown performance he had in the beginning of the year. Put him in my lineup. He didn't score again until week 17 or whatever. And I mean, it was just like you had a guy for 13, 14 weeks who did nothing for you. And it was like he would get the opportunities, he would drop the pass, or he'd get a flag called. So it's even worse, right? Because it's not like a guy just isn't performing. It's like the guy's scoring a touchdown and then it's called back, man. There was just so much frustration with Mike Evans, so much anger I had towards that Buccaneers offense. And he got the targets. It just never worked out. I didn't understand it. But, we did come up in the end against you, Johnny boy. So that's one thing that Mike Evans did for me all season long. The only time Mike Evans scores a touchdown is against you, which is sick.
Yeah. It's a good call. I think a lot of people would agree with that one for sure. So, Cinnabon triggering me. Do you guys remember when CH was number one or running back one at the beginning of the season? I remember. That's when I traded Josh Jacobs for him. So I remember very distinctly. I've thought about our league a lot, and if I never traded Josh Jacobs,
you would have won, dude. You would have won.
Or even if just Kyler never got hurt, I would have won.
You should just look
I've
at
done
it
the
though.
math. I've looked at every matchup.
I know you probably have. You should look at our league though and just say like, I can even still say this. I think you probably drafted like the best team, like top to bottom. I think you drafted a really good team. I didn't think it was going to be a good team at first, but it ended up being a bunch of guys that were really good. I mean, you had, I think your receiving core was what, like T. Higgins, Ahmad Ra, Mike Williams, Devontae Smith. Wasn't that what you had at the receiving position? I mean, it was crazy. And then you had Josh Jacobs. I forget
Eckler, Goddard.
Eckler, Goddard.
Ended
Yeah,
up with people. Then I had Lawrence. I had Gino at a point. It's just I don't want to talk about it. Can we move on?
but
We
what
move
place
on.
did you
Move
get?
on. All right, fantasy savior. I went Jerick McKinnon here for sure, but I do think it was close. So basically, what we want to look at with this category, right, is a player you picked up mid-season, end of season, who propelled you into the playoffs, but I think more importantly, got you through the playoffs and potentially got you a championship. You probably picked up McKinnon between weeks 9 and 13. Uh, Weeks 11 and 12, he was very down with 5 or less points. Weeks 9 and 10, 10 points and 11 points. But weeks 13 through 17, 12 or more fantasy points, 34 fantasy points in the first round of the playoffs, 12 in the semifinals, 22 in the fantasy championship. Just a player who I don't know if anyone really saw coming and just had a monster end of season. He had a touchdown in every game between weeks 13 and 18. He had 2 touchdowns in 3 of those games. A very nice finish to the season. Someone who you didn't draft, you picked up off the waivers and just balled out for you throughout the playoffs and maybe got you a championship. I think my other 2 players I want to mention, then I'll let Steven give his choice. Christian Watson, but he kind of turned it off in the fantasy playoffs. And then Cam Akers, because Cam Akers was like your RB4 for the last month of fantasy football. So yeah, but I'll go Jerick McKinnon. He's my savior.
Yeah, John, with all the good players to pick from here, it's funny. I picked Jerry McKinnon too. I think he was a pretty standout guy here for sure, though. But I think the 6 games in a row scoring was just something that really just tipped the cap. And honestly, you could say that this is like the leading receiver outside of Travis Kelce for the Chiefs going into the playoffs. I'm actually thinking about putting him in my playoff challenge on my RB2 spot behind Christian McCaffrey, just because this guy who could end up becoming a serious problem just all the way through the Super Bowl.
Yeah, lots of good options in the chat too. Tyler Algier, and I think he's a good call too. Finally got the usage we wanted out of him, but I go McKinnon here. I like McKinnon. So, all right, let's move right along. Fantasy MVP. Oh gosh, I didn't know it was up next. Well, here's the big award. I'm going Josh Jacobs here, and I'll tell you guys why I went Josh Jacobs here. Because there are a lot of players you can consider here. You can take a really easy call, like a Austin Eckler, who's your RB1, a Josh Allen, Patty Mahomes, neck and neck for quarterback one. You go Travis Kelce here. You could go with any receiver of your pick, Tyreek Hill, JJ Adams, whoever, right? But I think when we look at Josh Jacobs in comparison to everyone I mentioned, he was the player who you spent the least amount of draft capital on out of all of those guys. And he finished as your RB3 on the season in full PPR. If you play in half PPR or standard, he was your RB1 or 2, just depends on your scoring format. Over 1,600 rushing yards, 12 touchdowns, 400 receiving yards. That's through week 18 stats right there. Overall, only gave you single digits in 4 games and just had a monster, massive, incredible year. And for me, like I said, you spent the least amount of draft capital on Jacobs. So I went with Josh Jacobs for this category. But I will say Tyreek Hill was really close for me because a lot of people kind of slept on him and he came in as your wide receiver 2 on the season. He got pushed back to, in most drafts, to the mid of the second round, some drafts end of the first, but clearly for most drafts, mid to end of the second round. But I still think Josh Jacobs in some leagues went in the 4th or 5th round. I mean, it just depends on your league and how many teams are drafting. But I also want to mention, like all off season long and all mock draft season, I was saying get Josh Jacobs as your RB2, your RB3 is in a contract year, is going to have a good year. But I will say that my theory was the Raiders offense was going to be very improved with their new whatever. And that didn't really happen. Jacobs just had a really good season. But overall, I take Josh Jacobs as my fantasy MVP on the season.
My fantasy MVP as well, John. And not to goof on you, but I think with the story that your fantasy season had with trading him and the impact that trading him had on your year, seeing as how you went from not making playoffs to the fact that you literally would have won the championship, just kind of speaks to the volumes of how important Josh Jacobs was as a player this year. Where you got him in your leagues was really also the defining point of what makes him an MVP. He's what we look for every season when you are dropping those mock drafts every single day, man. This is exactly what we're looking for. Those gems that are hidden in the dirt, man. Josh Jacobs was a scrapper. He was a guy in the dirt, man, every single year where he was that RB2 guy, and then boom, he breaks out. So that's going to be, again, in the offseason what we're trying to figure out. We're trying to find out to get our Josh Jacobs this season. Obviously, last year, right, Cooper Kupp goes from like 4th to 6th round and ends up being him. But Josh Jacobs, really good pick. And I will say, well, I want to ask you, what are your initial thoughts on Jacobs next year if he comes back to Vegas with all this tread that's been on him? Are you still super high on him? Are you taking him in the first?
I'm so tired of hearing tread on running backs and the phrase injury prone running backs. People are like, Saquon Barkley is injury prone, don't draft him. Christian McCaffrey is injury prone. Josh Jacobs is injury prone.
They're all injury prone.
Yeah,
They're
exactly. The position.
Swift is the only one that really you can hold that.
But now it's going to be Jonathan Taylor. It's Derrick Henry every single year. What about the tread on his tires? What about the potential injuries? He's been a top
I want to
5
see this tread, by the way. I want to see the tread, man. Show me the tread, guys.
Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, Aaron Jones, Zeke, who finished, outside of the top.
That guy's like, sipping cup like a soup out of a cup at an old folks' home, man. This guy's like 100 years old next year.
Well, it's the thing. All those, Dalvin Cook, like the list goes on and on. You just until you see it, you have to draft them, and I don't worry about it. I mean, the bigger concern for me is if Jacobs goes to a different team and there's another valuable running back there, because so many teams are trying, it's exactly what we just talked about. It's a position that you get more injuries at, just like the linebacker position, right? Way more hits. The tread on the tires is a thing from a realistic standpoint, but a lot of teams are going to try and become the Cowboys, where they utilize Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott and have a run game like that and use 2 guys. So I think Jacobs will get re-signed, but if he does go to another team and maybe there's another running back lingering around, I would be more concerned with that. But overall, in terms of the injury thing, like, it can happen to anyone. It happens at the running back position, and I'm not worried about it. I'm not. So
no, yeah, and I was just kind of trying to prompt the question, but
you're trying to fire me up.
But I like Josh Jacobs next year too. If he's a Raider, I would hope that Josh McDaniels would like get fired or something, but I don't think that can happen. But yeah, I got a lot of love for him going into next year for sure too.
All right, so that does it. There's our 2022 Fantasy Football Awards for you guys. That was fun. I appreciate you guys hanging out and going through that with us. We're going to go through our divisional round playoff predictions next, but fantasy season's over, and we just want to say thank you guys so much for all the support this year, everything that you guys did, checking out all the videos, all the start set videos, all the must start videos, kicker videos, defensive videos, coming out to all the fantasy Q&A live streams, just everything that you guys did as a community, smashing the like, dropping comments, being interactive, and just being a huge and the sole reason why our channel has continued to grow at the pace it's grown at. So thank you guys so much for everything, man. It was a great season. I can't believe it's over. I've still got my, every year, last year at least, it's only our second year, but I do like a final video for the season that's coming out shortly. I'll kind of wrap my thoughts on the year up in that video, but just wanted to put that shout out to you guys, to the Catch fam out there as well. All right, let's see. Here's your 2023 NFL playoffs, man. We've got Chargers, Jags, Ravens, Bengals, Dolphins, Bills, Cowboys, Bucks, Giants, Vikings. Oh no, I'm talking like this. Seahawks, Niners. So, Steven, very quickly, how much time do you have?
9:15.
Oh God. Okay. All right.
I can go to 9:20 if we stretch it out.
No, I just want to make sure we're
Yeah.
going. So, all right, AFC. I'm so torn on these games. I just want to start with that. I'm very torn on a lot of these.
Okay, really?
Yeah. I don't even Chargers, Jaguars. Let's just start here. Okay. Um, I don't even know. Like, I don't know why I feel.
I think this is the only game that I'm very split 50-50 on. I will say I was going to ask you what's the biggest surprise of the entire playoffs things, but I'm going to wait till we're on the NFC bracket for that. But I think this is the closest game here between the Chargers Jags. I know the odds are pretty close between the two. I think this is obviously a game. It's between Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence. I think that this is again. I'm very skeptical of the Chargers, right? I'm very skeptical of them. I do like Doug Peterson more as a coach, but I'm just really not too sure if either of these teams are ready to win this game. That's where I'm kind of at, man. I don't think either of these teams are ready to go to the next week, but I probably tip my hat to the Chargers right now, unfortunately.
See, I think I lean the Jags because I think I lean Doug Peterson as a head coach over Brandon Staley. And Mike Williams might not play, which I think impacts this game.
So here's my thing. And this could be, not a point because of Brandon Staley's incompetence as a head coach. But if Austin Eckler gets the rock a ton of times, they haven't really been that efficient at running the ball this year anyways. But if they give him the ball a lot, he is going to slice and dice that Jaguars defense, man. Running back position, I think he's going to do well against that Jags team in the playoffs. And I think Austin Eckler is going to be amped up for that game. Whereas on the flip side, Trevor Lawrence did not look good against a bad Tennessee defense last week in a big-time game where it was win and you're in. Just, haven't seen it, right? The last couple times we've seen Trevor Lawrence on a big stage, hasn't really done it, right? He played Joe Burrow in the college championship. He got smoked. He got his ass embarrassed on the big screen. Then it's a win-in game against Tennessee. And honestly, he was not the reason they won that game. That defense was. So, I don't know, man. Justin Herbert, I'm going to give the nod to him, even though he's been a little up and down in the year.
I'm so torn, man. I feel like I can make an argument either way. Mike Williams and Bosa are out, if that
means anything. I will say, and my mom, I saw in the chat saying she wants the Jags. I am rooting for the Jags, too, on this one. I want Trevor Lawrence to make a name for himself here. I think Justin Herbert has already kind of done that for himself. So I'm going to be rooting for the Jags, but I'm kind of feeling like Chargers as of today.
Ravens at Bengals.
This is easy. This is very easy.
Yeah, we still don't know if Jackson's going to play, which is huge.
I don't think they know.
It's up to Lamar. I think he's going to do what he wants to do. I still go with the Bengals either way, though. I think they're the better football team, as good as the Ravens defense has been since they acquired Roquan Smith. I am on the Joe Shiesty hype train. I've been on it for a minute, and I'm not coming off it. So I'll root for the Bengals and believe in them until they lose.
Burrow's a winner. I have very few tickets remaining on my futures for Super Bowl. In fact, that's my only one remaining for the Bengals. So I'm pulling for Joe Burrow, but this guy's an absolute winner. He's not going to let a Ravens team, which seems like they're battling themselves week to week. It doesn't even seem like that locker room is a healthy place. Their quarterback definitely is not there, present, doesn't want to be there. I think the Bengals are going to win big in this one. I think they're going to definitely make a statement entering the playoffs.
I go Bengals for sure. I agree. And I think the next game's easy for me too. I go Dolphins at Bills. I go with the Bills for sure.
Yeah, the Bills is another one where I think if you're, considering parlays, anything like that, this is definitely an easy teaser to juice the odds here, to just kind of throw them in there. This would be completely baffling to me if the Bills somehow lost this game. It would, I think, blow a lot of people's minds. I think the odds right now are like -600 for the Bills to win straight up. I don't know. Has there been any update on Tua? I don't think it's looking great.
I don't think Tua. He still hasn't been cleared for football activity. Then Teddy Bridgewater just returned to practice, and Skylar Thompson is
just a bad situation, man.
Yeah,
he's a bad situation.
Yeah, man, and he's Skylar Thompson. So, no offense, Skylar, we love you, bro. But yeah, you just go Bills. You just go Bills here. Bills are gonna win, for sure. So, all right, let's move along. NFC. Cowboys at Bucks. I'm torn on this one. Yeah,
This one is really brutal because I do not like the Bucks. I think they're a bad team, and I think this year they have really stunk it up. And everybody thinks that Tom Brady's going to do something that he's really not going to do. Outside of the one game he had against Carolina with no DBs, I think I would have said, let's say if I knew what happened in that Cowboys Washington game, but I didn't know what happened in that Bucks game while Tom Brady was playing with some of the starters in that lineup, I would say Buccaneers here. But the Bucks didn't play good either. Again, right? They came back out after blowing out the Panthers. They come back out and they don't look great. Atlanta hung in there. The offense was still kind of stuck in the mud. This team just doesn't have as much momentum as I think they need to in order for Tom Brady to do his normal thing. I'm going to go with the Cowboys here. I think there's a lot of momentum going towards the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in terms of Vegas odds and stuff like that. And this whole grass thing where the Cowboys apparently suck. No questions. Dak Prescott is really screwing this team over for sure. But Tom Brady's not playing good football. And I think the Cowboys get it done.
these two teams played each other.
Week one.
Yeah.
That was with Q. What now? Actually, that was with Dak. He gets hurt in the game. But that was before Tony Pollard became Tony Pollard. I think that was before this team started hitting its stride too. The Bucks weren't good then either. But I don't know. I mean, it's tough. Do you have a stance? Like, are you gonna make a? You got to make a pick. You got to make a pick on the street. But
I think I'll go Cowboys as well.
It's really tough, man. I just really don't have any conviction in this Buccaneers team at all.
Yeah. It's really close because I still think that Brady can pull it out.
The only thing that makes me think that Brady gets this done is that I think the NFL wants, Brady to win. He's going to get some calls, right?
Sure.
Everyone wants to see Sean Payton in Dallas, or I think a lot of Dallas fans do. I say they fire McCarthy if they lose this game.
Oh, they won't fire McCarthy. He's a yes man. That's all you have to be a Dallas.
I don't know, man. If they get Sean Payton coming over there, that might be a little different.
All right. Giants and Vikings. This one's really tough for me, man. I actually kind of like the Giants here.
That's what I was going to say. The biggest surprise out of all these games is I think the Giants get it done in this one. When you look at the Vikings, they had a bunch of up and down games all year long. The Giants were kind of consistent with what they did, man. They played gross football, but they bring you down and they fight you in the dirt. And I think the Giants are going to win this one.
And my concern with the Vikings is like when they just play poorly, they play poorly, man. It's just tough. I mean, so these two teams played each other 3 weeks ago. The Vikings won by 3. And I just think the Giants are going to come into this game and say, we can do this thing. We basically did it 3 weeks ago. And I felt like even though the Vikings won that game, that was like the Giants. It felt like the Giants won that game. I don't know why. I guess because they were the underdog. But
yeah, and here's another thing too. Dable basically got 2 weeks where he's just scouting the Vikings, right? Or he's just scouting the playoffs. So he's not even worried about his last week's matchup. He's just like, all right, I don't care. Eagles win the game, right? Brian Dable's fired up for this game. If you think you got a heavy total of Saquon Barkley throughout the season, Saquon Barkley is going to be juiced up for this game. This is the biggest game of his life. They're going to give Saquon the ball probably 30 plus times, man. And I don't think this Vikings defense can handle Saquon Barkley up to that level. And I think Daniel Jones is going to be running the ball a lot too. And this Giants defense, Kayvon Thibodeau, he's going to be eating Kirk Cousins' lunch.
Oh, it's just tough, man. I'm really, in comparison to last year, I'm way more torn than I am this.
The only thing that goes in the favor of the Vikings is Justin Jefferson. I think that's it. I think other than that, I don't really have a lot of faith in any of these guys on the Vikings team at all, especially Kirk Cousins in a big spot.
I'm going Giants, though. It's trusting my gut, bro. Seahawks at Niners. This one I feel good about. I'm going the Niners.
Yeah, I mean, just sneak peek. These are the guys that I think are going to represent the NFC. I like the 49ers a lot. I think Brock Purdy is exactly what the 49ers need to make it to. And I think they are going to destroy my biggest surprise, Geno Smith. I think they're going to make him look quite silly. And I think the Seahawks are an embarrassment to be in there because I think it should have been the Lions. I would have so much rather seen the Detroit Lions in the playoffs.
Yeah. Overall, I mean, the Seahawks and Niners have played each other twice this year. Okay. Niners beat them week 2, 27-7. And then they also played 4 weeks ago. Niners won 21-13. But that game was not that close. I mean, the Hawks had some momentum at the very end of the game. But overall, majority of that game, the Niners were just beating on the Seahawks. So I think you can look at that, but overall, I just think the Niners are the better team. I mean, kudos to Geno and the Hawks for making the playoffs, but overall, I just don't think they get past the Niners here.
All right, dude. And I tell you what, you're doing your NFL playoff challenge, you're doing your picks for the Super Bowl. Nobody has an easier road, in my opinion, than the freaking 49ers. They get the Seahawks and then they get the Giants or the Vikings, man. That's a pretty easy stretch right there. I mean, I guess you can make a couple arguments with Kansas City, but I don't know. I don't think seeing Justin Herbert or Trevor Lawrence is necessarily an easy feat. But these 49ers, they can make a run pretty quickly.
That's a good point, man. I like them. Like for me right now, it's Niners or Eagles. It's that close for me.
But the Eagles, I think, have a little bit of a harder stretch, right? They got to get through Dallas or Tampa, and then we'll see what happens. But yeah, it's going to be a fun one either way.
Tough for me in the AFC, man. I'm really torn between the Bills, Chiefs, and Bengals overall, and then I feel like whoever wins the Chargers-Jags game could be an upset team throughout the playoffs. But NFC, I look at it, and I'm like, Niners, Eagles. If there's truly an upset team for me, it's, believe it or not, maybe the Giants. But overall, man, I agree. Niners going to really
playoff. So, John, let me ask you this. Not necessarily a team to make it all the way to the Super Bowl, but who is this year's Bengals out of these guys' contenders? Is it the Bengals again? Somebody to come in here and shake it up and knock out a top seed team. That's, I think, kind of what I'm trying to get at here. I would say you could look at Dallas based on their rankings and say this could be a team that if they knock out Tampa, I think they can beat Philly straight up and they can make it all the way to the Super Bowl. I don't really believe in Dallas, but I think if you're going to say who is this year's the Cincinnati Bengals, I think Dallas has probably the best chance of making it all the way.
Yeah, and I've talked about that in the past couple of nights, talking about the playoffs. Like, if there is another team from the NFC, I do think it is the Cowboys, but it's just so hard to trust them because it's like year after year, Cowboys go to the playoffs and then they bail out, But I do think, for me, it comes down to Tony Pollard, Ezekiel Elliott, and the defense. But Dak is just making too many mistakes. I worry about another blow up in the playoffs like they have every year. So I just don't know, man. But I don't disagree. I think they're up there. It's just a really tough team for me to trust personally.
Yeah, I think if you look at the AFC side and you look at the underdogs, like Dolphins, definitely not. Ravens, definitely not. Chargers could be, right? But I think both of us have way too many question marks around the coaching staff there that I think is merited, right? But I think you got to throw Justin Herbert's hat in the ring there, but I think the AFC side is so hard because you got to go through Kansas City and then you got to go through maybe Cincy potentially. It's a whole nightmare situation for sure.
Sure. Yeah. It's tough. And like Jada's mentioned the Bucks, I still think if Tom Brady's involved, you just don't know.
No, it's done. It's over. It's over, dude. I'm so sick of people saying that. It's over. As somebody who owned Mike Evans, it is done.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. So that'll wrap up the stream for tonight. Thank you guys for hanging out, going through our 2022 Fantasy Football Awards. Truly appreciate everyone who came out. And there's a little playoff prediction. I don't know what that was. We just kind of went back and forth for most of those. But it's just tough right now. It's tough to call. But overall, great stream. Appreciate you guys. It was a beautiful fantasy football season. Very bittersweet. It's very sad that it's over, but it's gone. And we're on to the playoffs. So we're going to have plenty of content coming your guys' way throughout the next couple of weeks, really. And overall, we have a lot planned for the channel in the offseason, too. So in terms of the channel, really just stay tuned on Discord and everything. We'll keep in contact with you guys. And Steven will still be coming on once a week and everything. So we got plenty of content coming throughout the playoffs and a lot of stuff I'm excited about. So, and plenty of mock drafts. I know you guys are waiting on another mock draft, but we'll get to those too. So, yeah, the season's over. I'm sad, and there's a big giant void of darkness in my soul. But fantasy will come back, and we will do everything we can here at the channel to keep the fantasy conversation going year round. That's what we do. But meanwhile, let's get ready for 2023 NFL playoffs. It's playoff time, baby. So I'll let you sign off, Steven, and that'll wrap things up.
Very, very excited to enter the playoffs, and I'm pumped for every week to kind of break this down weekly and just kind of look at the different team matchups and everything. And as we get closer to hopefully the Chiefs and the Bengals in that conference championship, that is what I'm hoping to see there just for my futures odds. But yeah, man, it's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun. Fantasy season was a blast as always. And next year, let's just get ready for another Allen Robinson or Kyle Pitts, another fantasy bust, But no, it was a blast in 2022. And like you said, bunch of content over the off season. Both of us will still be around. I'll still be coming in. And we got a fun 2023 for sure.
Let's go. All right, guys. Appreciate you guys, man. Hit that like on the way out. Check out all the links down below. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Discord, or join the Discord, I should say. And I'll be on tomorrow night to run through a mock draft with you guys. And I threw out an early top 10 rankings at wide receiver and running back for the 2023 season. So you guys can go check those out. I'm going to work on quarterbacks and tight ends this week as well. But outside of that, we're going to run through some mock drafts this week as requested by you guys. And that'll wrap up the week. So that was a fun stream. I love doing that every year. It's fun. So. All right, that'll do it, guys. Love you guys, man. Love this community. Love the Catch fam. Thank you guys for hanging out tonight. I know we didn't get to chat as often because we were flying through, but next week we'll go through our what's the second round of the playoffs? Divisional predictions, and we'll talk some football with Steven. Then the following week we'll do the conference championships, and then we'll do Super Bowl. So yeah, we'll have more of these streams coming where Steve and I just talk, and you guys hopefully don't sit there and cry listening to our voices. So love you guys, man. Love the Catch fam. Love this community. Everyone have a great night. Everyone be safe. And that'll do it for tonight. With that, I'll say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on the Catch. And peace.